BBC Radio York.
Now, why would anyone in their right mind want to crawl around in total darkness, battling against cold, against water and against mud? It's a fair enough question, but I suppose if you're into caving, that's exactly what you enjoy doing. It's also a pastime that means you can say you have made completely new discoveries and have been to places on, or in this case under, the planet where no human being has ever set foot before. The other day, a couple of weeks ago, when there was actually still some snow on the ground, I went to meet a group of cavers near Kirby Moorside, a determined bunch of gentlemen who, over the last dozen years or so, have been exploring a previously unknown cave system, a system that has got wonderful names associated with it, like Excalibur and the Jenga Pot and all sorts of things like that. Great bunch of guys from the York Caving Club, the North York Moors Caving Club, the Northern Council of Caving Clubs. Matt Ewells is from the York Caving Club, and, well, he started off by telling me about his earliest experience of caving.
At first, I didn't enjoy it, and I did a few trips, and I thought, oh, this isn't for me, and I went home and I reflected on that, and I thought, you know what, I've actually just done something really exciting. I've been somewhere that hardly anyone ever gets to see, somewhere really amazing, and I was really annoyed at myself for not enjoying it, so I went back and did it again. And then it was the sense of adventure, the exploration, the people you meet, and the adrenaline, the sport. It was a combination of everything that got me into caving.
Andy Brennan, you're part of the caving team here. Is that part of it, the essential thought that you could perhaps get caught underground, or this feeling of claustrophobia that so many people are very frightened of?
It's what most people think of first when you mention caving. It's very rare that anything actually does happen, although it does very occasionally. We've had situations where people have come very close to drowning.
And you come here every week. I mean, why? What is there to do here every week? Surely a cave is a cave.
We've found this cave from nothing. It didn't exist till we started coming here. We dug our way into it in the first place, and we've been exploring it for 10 years. And I think we've got about 2 kilometres of passage.
2.8 kilometres.
Yeah, 2.8 kilometres of passage now. So
that's a lot of cave to go into.
It is, and we're the first people to see that. That's the real draw, I think.
Richard, you've been down there, I'm assuming.
I have indeed, yes.
What is there to see down there?
Well, there are towering passages, winding streamways, and an awful lot of flat-out crawling in mud.
Doesn't sound attractive, does it, really, when you put it like that? I mean, we're not talking about huge, sumptuous caverns with great stalactites and stalagmites, I'm assuming.
Not massive. We are here in a different sort of caving environment to that in the Dales. In the Dales, it's Carboniferous limestone. This is Jurassic limestone. It doesn't support great towering roofs. They would actually, unfortunately, collapse. So there tends to be not as much of the very large caverns. But the water finds its way, and where the water goes, we attempt to follow. And it doesn't matter whether it's a grotty, flat-out crawl in mud. It's still a discovery.
Is this a wetsuit job? I mean, you've got to be togged up to the eyeballs, or do you just crawl through in your jeans and your trainers and say the washing machine's going to have a tough job when we get home?
Well, my wife doesn't like the fact that I use the washing machine to clean my kit. But, yeah, it's specialist kit. It's usually, we wear a one-piece furry suit, a fleece suit, with an oversuit on top. But, yeah, there's times when we'll wear a wetsuit when it's a bit more aquatic.
There is still, I should say, days after most of the snow has melted. Here we are down in the valley where the stream is and where the caves are. It's still icy on the fields here. I've not seen snow for several days now. Are conditions suitable for caving at the moment, or does it really not matter what it's doing up top?
It varies very much from cave to cave. Some caves are abandoned, so they don't carry water along some of the passages anymore, and they're safe to explore, and then other parts of the cave are still active, so they carry the water, and they can get a bit hazardous in wet conditions. Because we discovered and explored this system, we know it incredibly well, and we know which bits are safe in wet weather like this, and which bits aren't. So, for example, there's an entrance further down the valley where it would not be possible to get into the main cave system from there because certain bits of it are sumped off, so they're completely full of water. But later on today we're going to be heading down the cave via this nearer entrance here, where although you'll have a bit of a waterfall on your head on the way down, most of the passages are perfectly navigable despite the amount of water.
I can't say it's an attractive prospect, the idea of a waterfall on top of your head. Are there any moments when you actually think to yourself, why in goodness name am I doing this? Getting cold, getting wet, it's pitch dark, it's lots of mud. Why do it?
It's camaraderie. I think it's the spirit of being in a group of lads and lasses, some lasses, and the interaction between the guys, the banter, and the pub afterwards where you can tell your stories over and over again.
It's the sense of exploration as well. So this cave system was first discovered about 12 years ago by us, and we've explored it, we've mapped it. We're the first people to ever set eyes on some of the passages, and I think it's one of the biggest new UK cave discoveries in the last 15 years or so. Sort of 35 or so years ago, Richard here dived into a resurgence about a mile down the road where loads of water comes out of the ground at what was always assumed to be a spring. And he dived in there and found quite a significant cave.
Is there a eureka moment about that?
Absolutely. Just before we go on to that, an anecdote of the time was that James Holt, who's the local landowner here, he telling us a story that when this bridge here, which we're standing by, was built, there was an awful lot of debris and stuff going into the river here. And somebody noticed that Bog Hall Rising in the next valley, the water ran turbid, i.e. it was muddy. And so the connection was proposed then, or assumed then. So that's one of the reasons why we thought there might be a possible connection between the two.
And there was. See, proof that you've got to be a little bit of a detective and understand your geography and your geology to be a decent caver. We'll go back to the cavers of York Caving Club and the North York Moors Caving Club and the Council of Northern Caving Clubs in just a minute or two's time and find out more about what motivates these good folks to crawl about in the darkness and the mud and the water underground, and find out about the role of women when it comes to caving, because there were none there on the day I went to have a chat to them, but about a third of cavers are women.
BBC Radio York.
We're going underground with, a team comprised of people from different organisations, mainly the York Caving Club, but also the North York Moors Caving Club. Richard, who you're hearing from, he's part of that group. It was him, it turns out, who, diving into that pool all those years ago, sort of set the whole thing going. You may have noticed, as we go back to the cavers now, that it's an all-male group in what I think is perhaps true to say is quite a male-dominated sport. The question is, are there any women involved in caving at all? Gary Douthwaite.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'd say probably in the wider caving community, sort of nationally, I would say probably a third, in my experience, are women. So it's not all masculine. But it's probably changed a lot in more recent years. And it wasn't so long ago that a lot of the big national caving clubs didn't even allow women involved, in the 60s and 70s. But it's moved on a lot since then. So, yeah, there's still quite a lot.
Chris Twigg, how long have you been caving?
I'm sort of relatively new to it. I've got some from a slightly different background. I was more interested in mines, sort of man-made holes in the ground first. And then sort of got interested in hearing these guys had discovered a natural hole in the ground. So only about 4 or 5 years I've been coming here now. But
and you've been down the cave system that we're standing on top of now?
I've indeed, pretty much all of it, except some of the particularly nasty bits which I'll leave to the other guys.
Tell me about nasty bits. What's nasty down there?
Liquid mud tends to be the one that's not so nice. Sometimes when you dig in to try to get to a new place, you can end up in sort of river of liquid mud, which you sort of be lying in for most of the evening, which can be fairly unpleasant.
Rather like your colleagues. I mean, you're not selling it to me. A river of liquid mud in the dark. It just doesn't sound appealing. What is the attraction of it?
I suppose it is the element of discovery that when you get to the end of that passage full of liquid mud, you could be somewhere that no one has ever seen before. There's more people been on the moon, so it's somewhere completely new.
What's your best discovery or experience underground?
Oh, hang on. I have to think about that one.
It's very much a team effort, isn't it? I think it's very rare that any one person discovers something. It's usually a team, There's usually 4 or 5 of us in a particular area that we're trying to explore, and one day you pull a block out of the wall and that's it, something new,
So one day it will be that great big cavern full of crystals or dinosaur bones or something.
As has happened in the past here in various times, yeah.
Ian Dawson, what's your part in all of this?
So I'm probably the newest members of the group. I've been coming for just over a year now. I worked with Matt, and he'd sort of talked about his adventures he was going on a weekend, and I was sort of the chirpy young guy in the office and went, oh yeah, I'd like to have a go at that. And he thought, right, I'll show him, I'll take him to this,
I'll frighten the living daylights out of him.
I'll take him to the crawling, a little bit muddy, a little bit challenging at times cave, and I'll put him off it and, really give him a challenge. And I got out and with a big grin on my face and went, oh, it's great. And he was like, oh, well, you better come back again then. And I have. I've come every week for the last year and a half. And then
Explain the grin. The thought of being stuck down there in the dark, in the mud, in the cold, is not going to appeal to a lot of people. What has turned you on to it?
I think it's a difficult one, and you could actually pose that question about a lot of outdoor activities that are on the face of it quite challenging and can have some unpleasantries about them. And I mean, you mentioned the scenery. I mean, I get to enjoy the scenery by coming down and approaching the cave, but there's that extra sense of adventure underground. There's a bit of unpredictability. Even if someone's taking you down a cave, they know you've never been to this place before, and the guys talk about that. That element of discovery. I mean, there was quite a small section of cave I found a couple of months ago. I just happened to stumble into it, and
that's now yours.
Well, yeah, and you kind of get into it, and you're the first person that's ever laid eyes upon that ever in existence, and there's something almost undescribable about that. There's a sense of like achievement, accomplishment, like almost what you'd imagine early explorers would have when they're going off exploring these far-flung parts of the world.
Gary, where does this particular project on this site go? Because you and the others have discovered a couple of kilometres of cave underneath our feet now. Is there more to find?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Is there more to find? That there is a big blank area between where we lose the water underground and where it appears again on the surface at the bottom of the valley. There's probably a kilometre of unknown space there, and we know the water travels through it somehow. Whether it's big enough cave to get into and sort of sizable stuff or not, we don't know. But that's what keeps us coming back, because there's always that what's around the next corner moment, and we keep finding more and more, and who knows, it could be tonight, it could be 2 years from now,
Well, you can find out what the gentlemen's plans were for that night in just a moment or two's time, because, they were off back underground long after I'd left them, and when you can hear us crunching around in the snow that was still on the ground at the time I did that interview a couple of weeks ago. I love that thought. More people. So you can go down a pothole, down a cave in North Yorkshire, and know that when you walk into somewhere previously undiscovered, that more people have actually been on the moon than where you are standing now, which is quite exciting. As you heard there is a big blank area still to be discovered. We shall find out what the plans were for discovering what is down there under North Yorkshire, near Kirby Moorside, in a minute or two.
BBC Radio York.
Just as we were I was packing up, having met all the cavers near Kirby Moorside the other day, I started to learn about what plans were for later in the day, because all the guys were staying there. They were actually going to go down the cave. Obviously, I wasn't. Oh, no, I wasn't dressed appropriately. The river or the beck was up. And I think as I've got older, like my sense of vertigo's got worse, I think my sense of claustrophobia has probably got worse. However, Matt Yules and Gary Douthwaite told me what their plans were for later in the day, and it all sounded rather exciting.
Tonight we're heading off down Jenga Pot, which is one of the entrances to the cave. So last week we were doing some work in this very narrow, small passage. You have to crawl along it on your belly, and at the end of this passage there's a little rift that drops about 8 foot to a streamway flowing across. And this rift's really small. It's only about 4 or 5 inches wide.
You've had a camera down there?
Yeah. So at the end of last week's session, we got it large enough to lower a camera down, sort of like a GoPro kind of thing. And we got some video footage of the passage that's at the bottom of this rift. And it looks like it's about 2 foot high, and it vanishes off into darkness. And so that's quite tantalising. It means there's a cave passage down there that no one's ever explored. And so that's what we're back tonight to try and achieve. We're going to try and enlarge this rift a little bit, try and make it big enough to get whichever one of us is skinniest to fit down it. And
Gary, do you qualify?
I've been down some pretty horrific places in these things, yes, but I wouldn't really class myself as skinny. But we have some skinny people that we occasionally wheel out for such projects.
Thin cavers needed. Is that one of the qualifications?
all caving and digging groups need a thin man,
Yeah.
someone who's always sent to the front when
Slightly
it's
stupid usually as well.
when it's just far too narrow for anyone else.
So there's caving clubs full of people eating as quickly as possible, so they're not the one. How exciting is it to think that tonight, you could be going down and again finding something entirely new about this cave system?
Yeah, you just never know what's around the corner. I mean, it could be 2 foot, it could be a mile, it could be anything, and it's completely unknown.
And that feeling that you are the first person to stand there. I mean, it's not just in question, sometimes you walk up a big mountain and you think, I wonder if I'm the first person to have stood here, or if anybody stood here 50 or 100 years ago. But as far as we're concerned, there is no doubt that wherever you go in this cave system, wherever you discover that's new, you are the first people or the first person to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the best ways I've heard it phrased before in a book was that the scientific instruments have probed, every highest mountain and many of the deepest oceans, and there's very few places on Earth where no scientific instruments ever been there, no person's ever set eyes on it. If you want to go somewhere like that, you're looking to outer space. But here, we can potentially be exploring somewhere that no one's ever been before or known about before, and we're only half an hour from where we parked our car. So I think that's a really amazing thing, and that's what keeps us coming back here every week.
Yeah, you knew a lot of things about North Yorkshire, so did I. One thing I didn't realise was that people were making discoveries. People were setting foot in places where no one has ever trodden before. And it's happening today, or it's happening a couple of weeks ago, at night with the team going underground, into the darkness, into the cold, into the water, into the mud. My thanks to them for making me so welcome. If you want to find out more, go and have a look at the very, very excellent York Caving Club website. It's yorkcavingclub.org.uk. Just Google York Caving Club and you'll find a link there. You'll find their videos. You'll find details of the caverns and the caves and the potholes that they are exploring. It really is worth going to have a look. It's a fascinating website, and there are links to others that will take you to see more caves and more people being bold about going underground. I should mention as well that the North York Moors Caving Club, they have a very excellent website as well, so go and have a look at them. North York Moors Caving Club, if you Google that will take you to their website. More photographs of the places that are being explored in North Yorkshire, including the caves we've been hearing about this morning.
BBC Radio York.